So, I saw an article on Protestia this evening talking about how Jeff Durbin, Luke Pearson, and Zach Morgan, but I guess Zach Morgan asked himself to be removed as a plaintiff, are suing journalist Sarah Young and two former members, a couple from Apologia Church, for defamation and slander. I have a lot of thoughts about this. There's probably going to be a lot of rabbit trails, but I would like to first preface this video by saying when I was young in the faith, Jeff Durbin made a very big impact on me. I looked up to him. I consumed his sermons, his videos where he debated atheists, went to abortion clinics, and he was a big influence on me going to abortion clinics. I will say that none of my encounters at the abortion clinic were anything like his, but that's to be expected, I guess. It's not glamorous ministry by any means, but I was very influenced by him and looked up to him greatly. But about 5 years ago at the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference, that's when I kind of started noticing the cracks. His deeming it appropriate to curse, I guess to shock people, disgusted me. It disturbed me. It disturbed a lot of people, and rightly so. And then Apologia puts out a video basically gaslighting everybody that was disturbed by it, saying, people who have pious language commitments shouldn't watch this, because they make the prophets look bad. The prophets often said worse, and that was just evil. That was kind of the beginning of the end for Jeff Durbin and Apologia with me. I really stopped gravitating towards them, and then just kind of their coziness with Doug Wilson just eventually got rid of most of my listening to them. I haven't listened to them. I don't know when I listened to them last. It's been a couple of years at least. But I think this situation is not unique to what's going on now, and there have been other situations that I'll talk about here in a bit where Jeff Durbin has conducted himself very similarly, and frankly it's abusive. But I mean, the church they partner with, Doug Wilson's church, apparently has a lot of scandals there too that are swept under the rug, and former members coming out. And sadly, I think the celebrity pastor culture has made it to where people automatically side with their favorite celebrity pastor. And I don't think that's, I think often those victims are probably treated in an ungodly manner and just labeled as woke or apostates or bitter or whatever else. I've kind of noticed that on the right. If you go against, at one point it was Doug Wilson, I'm sure it still is to a certain extent, and then eventually Doug Wilson said something that the group didn't like, and so then he became part of the left, I guess, Big Eva, which Doug Wilson is not Big Eva, but there's just an ever-increasing radical, and I would say godless, trend in what once was Christian conservatism. I'm not going to get into the weeds on other things, but I think that we have a tendency, sadly, to want to vindicate those people that are very influential and that we look up to, and in the process we disregard people who likely have, at least in some cases, some legitimate claims. And I think with Jeff Durbin, as much as it hurts, it would have hurt more years ago, but I think there's merit to what people are saying about him, these people that come out as victims. I'm noticing a pattern with Jeff Durbin, and I will link the articles in down below when I publish the video. I'll link the articles. You read, you decide. I'm not going to make any definitive knowledge claims, certain, these are statements of fact. I'm giving my opinions on stories that have been presented. Off the top of my head, the first one is a number of years ago, the Bible-thumping wingnut guy, and I guess Apologia, Jeff Durbin specifically, went back and forth. Eventually, Tim Hurd, I guess, called and apologized to Jeff Durbin about something, and, it was accepted. A couple years go by, and I guess the Bible-thumping wingnut guy did a video critiquing Durbin. He wasn't criticizing him. I mean, I guess you could say criticism, but it wasn't just attacking, exposing, whatever. It was just, he was reviewing something, and he was talking about disagreements, and I guess Jeff Durbin got angry, and let me just go over here, and I'll just read the summary. You can find it on Protestia. Or, not Protestia, Pulpit and Pen, sorry. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, for 12 years, Tim Hurd worked in a full-time ministry. He eventually disqualified himself from the pastorate due to engaging in immoral behavior. He now makes his living as a truck driver in northeastern United States. Though no longer a vocational minister, Tim remains passionate about evangelism and apologetics. Tim was joined on his podcast by two co-hosts, Lynn Pettis and Colin Pearson. Tim and Lynn had a falling out with Colin over the controversial doctrine of theonomy. This led to conflict between Tim and Jeff Durbin, who is an influential post-millennial theonomist. Tim began to vociferously and publicly criticize Jeff Durbin on his podcast and social media. He had reasonable ground for disagreement, but he went too far at times, outright misrepresenting Durbin. Ashamed of his bad behavior, Tim eventually called Durbin and his ministry partner Marcus Pittman to apologize to them. Tim admitted to not only misrepresenting Durbin, but to acting out of envy, for Durbin's ministry was much more popular than his own. Tim asked Jeff to forgive him for his sin. Durbin did. He also, unbeknownst to Tim, recorded the phone call. Some 2 years later, Tim once again took to his podcast to criticize Durbin, this time for his technique in evangelism. Durbin took offense and published the recording of Tim's prior repentance on an anonymous YouTube channel. Tim was shocked that Durbin, a pastor, would not only record a conversation with a penitent brother, but publish it on the internet. So, that is the brief history of it. Let's see if I can... Okay, that link just Okay, that goes to a video that I'm not going to watch. But I remember some texts where seeing something, and this is just me remembering something, so take it for a grain of salt, but I guess Tim Hurd tried to contact Jeff Durbin, and Jeff Durbin said, "No, I need to talk to your pastor." It doesn't seem very pastoral or brotherly to not try to work things out, and it doesn't sound like he was saying any kind of slander or anything else. He was just criticizing Jeff Durbin's way of evangelizing. That's fine. I would criticize some of what Frank Turek does with his apologetics. I pretty much like presuppositional, so Frank Turek's is a little, I don't care for it, and I would, if I cared to, I would do a video criticizing his evangelism method or apologetics method, whatever. That doesn't mean I don't like Frank Turek. I don't think he's a brother, or I don't think he's done a lot of good things. I like Frank Turek, but that's just an example. The one trend I will notice here is that Jeff Durbin does not like anybody disagreeing with him. That is what I am extracting. And what I'm reading through is a very, very long article just talking about different instances. It looks like there's a big specific instance that's similar to what's going on now with a guy named Sean Sampson. Let's see. This one is about Sean Sampson. Sean had set up his iPad to save all his daughter Eleanor's text messages. He was reading even the ones that had been deleted from her iPhone for the first time. Just a few months prior, Eleanor had been a friendly 12-year-old girl who was interested in typical 12-year-old girl things like cartoons, games, and her family's and her after-school performing arts group. Now Eleanor was withdrawn and sad like her father. She had been isolated from her friends and her church family. The Sampsons were members of Apologia Church in Phoenix, Arizona. Apologia was Sean Sampson had engaged in ministry under Durbin's leadership, occasionally teaching midweek Bible studies at Apologia Church. Their families had been friends. Now there was an uncomfortable distance between them, a distance that had a lot to do with what Sean found on the iPad, numerous texts of a profane nature that had been sent from a member of Durbin's household to Eleanor. And that is something to keep in mind, because a lot of what this next, what the current thing with the lawsuit involves is Jeff Durbin's daughter gossiping over the phone with texts. And it sounds like this is what we have here. I don't know if it's his daughter or not, but it's someone in his household. The messages were full of profane language and were of a sinful nature. One of them contained a link to an inappropriate content on the internet and encouraged Eleanor to look it up. The profane messages had a notion DAR, which in teen text speak stands for delete after reading. Sean once had the unfortunate experience of having a talk with his pastor, Jeff Durbin, about the sins between their mutual households. It came to the attention of the parents that a member of Durbin's household and Sean's daughter had engaged in inappropriate behavior during a sleepover at Durbin's home. Sean admitted to Durbin that his daughter was culpable. He did so simply recognizing that his daughter, like everyone else, has a sin nature. Durbin taped the conversation. It seems like Durbin, just from all the things I'm reading, likes to have dirt on people. he wants to make everybody else out to be the problem, everybody else out to be the one at fault. He wants to have some, in a sense, blackmail. He wants to have some dirty laundry to be able to dump. That's what it is in this current suit. He's sending out private texts between him and the parties involved, just showing that he's not at fault. And his attitude, what I've seen from him, is not pastoral at all. Frankly, it's evil. But anyway, continuing on, he used Sean's admission against him later when he painted Eleanor as a predator. Durbin had accused Sean's teen daughter of being the aggressor in the situation, so I assume this is a male that she was talking to. Durbin's family went as far as to call the after-school program, or performing arts program, in which Eleanor was involved, to warn about her. This is a 12-year-old girl, and they're calling the school to warn them about a 12-year-old girl. It doesn't sound like Jeff Durbin did the pastoral thing here and, had somebody from the church meet with her and her family, ideally a woman that was qualified to counsel other women. It doesn't seem pastoral to just, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but as a pastor of a church, the lead pastor, this just ain't right. Eleanor, to her devastation, was removed from the program, if not for the text messages that Sean later found on his iPad, messages from a member of Durbin's household. The narrative that his young daughter was a predator could have stood. The profane messages sent by the member of Durbin's household, initially deleted, proved that Sean's child was not a predator in the situation. When Sean brought the existence of the text messages to Durbin's family, Durbin's wife, Candy, was dismissive. It was nobody's fault, she stated. Now, with evidence incriminating their own family member available, the Durbins all but blew off the situation. There was no apology for actions Durbin's family had taken against Eleanor. When another former member of Apologia Church informed Sean about Tim Hurd's experience with Jeff Durbin, he reached out to tell of his own experience of being recorded by the popular pastor. Okay, this one's about a guy named Rod. After watching Durbin's content for the Christian Faith and online videos, Rod became a self-described Durbinite. Upon moving to Phoenix, he began attending Apologia Church. Though his family became friends with the Durbin family, Rod never joined their church. Rod's daughter Sandra began having social trouble with a member of the Durbin household. These troubles were caused by what Rod described as typical teenage cattiness. Sandra had received harassing text messages from the Durbin household. Rod asked for a meeting between his family and the Durbins and a third family with the hope of mediating the teenage conflict. The meeting was taped. Without the knowledge of Rod and his wife, and reconciliation was not achieved. Without her parents' knowledge, Sandra made her own recording of the meeting on her cell phone. After the meeting was over, Rod shared some of the issues he was having with Durbin's family, with men he had previously gone to for counsel. Apologia's elders found out soon afterward. He received a message from the elders of Apologia Church stating that Rod had engaged in gossip by speaking about these issues with others. Now that's kind of odd, because Jeff Durbin released recordings of Tim Hurd and a private call to him, but he released it publicly for everybody to hear, which is itself gossip, a form of gossip. Nobody else was relevant to that situation. And now here he is accusing this individual of gossiping. Rod was informed that the recorded meeting would be shared with the Apologia Church body if he did not take action in accordance with repentance. This is abusive. So it's gossip when he goes to others about it, but they're blackmailing him essentially into apologizing, admitting his wrongdoing, which he didn't do anything wrong. Releasing the recording is not, one, a pastor shouldn't be recording conversations, and two, he shouldn't be threatening congregants to release that information. Had Sandra, distrustful of Apologia's elders, not made her own surreptitious recording of the meeting on her cell phone, no one would have known that an edited version of the meeting had been released. After the actions taken by its elders, Rod no longer felt comfortable attending Apologia and sought out other church fellowship. Rod was later informed by Sandra that the same member of Durbin's household who had sent Eleanor Sampson inappropriate text messages had sent her one to her as well. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Alright, Simon Mays can relate to the experiences of Sean, Rod, and Daniel. I skipped over Daniel's, but if you want to hear about it, read this article. I recommend you do. I'm just kind of giving the cliff notes of it. Simon Mays can relate to the experiences of Sean, Rod, and Daniel. Like Tim Hurd, he too believes he has been taped apologizing to Durbin. As in the case with Tim Hurd and Sean Sampson, his apology was later used to argue against him. Simon is a bivocational pastor of a Reformed Baptist church in the Phoenix area and is quite familiar with the goings-on at Apologia Church. His two daughters, Amanda and Samantha, are former members. Seeking a church with a more mature leadership, Samantha and her husband decided to leave Apologia. During a meeting to discuss their exit, Jeff Durbin began to speak negatively of Daniel Toro. Samantha, and later her sister, thought this inappropriate. Sounds like gossip. After speaking with Daniel, they consulted their father about what they should do. Simon recommended they confront the elders of Apologia on the matter of speaking about Daniel, which was, in their opinion, gossip about Daniel. Unfortunately, Simon discussed the situation that was brought to his attention by his daughters with a friend. Simon soon realized that he himself engaged in gossip. Though Durbin was not aware of this offense, Simon took it upon himself to call Durbin and apologize. A few minutes into the call, Simon thought he heard Durbin fumbling around on the other end of the line. Then Durbin asked questions of Simon that led him to repeat some statements he had already made earlier in the call. Simon's apology was later used as evidence that Simon lacked sound judgment when his daughters confronted Durbin about his treatment of Daniel. The daughters got nowhere with Durbin upon confronting him. As it stands, Apologia Church's elders have warned their church members to avoid further contact with Daniel Toro until he repents of what they perceive as sinful and divisive behavior, going as far as to issue an official document detailing Daniel's offenses. Simon Mays left aghast at the treatment he received from Jeff Durbin. As Apologia elders, including James White, took to their webcast after it was revealed that Jeff Durbin had posted secretly recorded audio of Tim Hurd in order to defend him over it, little did we know that at that time such a practice of making secret recordings and stockpiling them for later use was an ordinary practice of Apologia. Sorry, I'm just reading some stuff at the bottom. Okay. So, I think this behavior from Jeff Durbin and the elders there at Apologia should be kind of thought about. One, persons of Jeff Durbin's household, sounds like they're children, engage in sinful and inappropriate behavior via text message. Jeff Durbin records people's phone calls and then uses it against them. He uses their repentance or admission of guilt against them and their apology. He does not like criticism of himself, and in all of this you should ask yourself, is this how a pastor deals with problems? Is this how a pastor deals with personal problems in the congregation? Because there are problems going to crop up with the pastor and his family and the congregation with others, and is it pastoral to air dirty laundry like private recordings to the whole church? I don't think so, but what do I know? Let's see here. This one is mostly about Tim Hurd. Let's see here. Okay, there's that. Okay, so I'm going to go to Protestia now, and we'll get into the weeds of this latest thing. There are 3 different articles. Protestia was just sharing one from a different place called AZ Central. I assume that means Arizona. I don't know. Sorry. There's a link to the full article, which I am by no means going to read. It is long. But I'll read some of it. Whoops. Might just see if there's a Cliff Notes version. Okay, so here's the Protestia article. This is just kind of delving into it. It does have at the beginning, update, Zachary Morgan has removed himself as one of the plaintiffs. In October, 3 well-known pastors in Arizona sued a married couple and an independent journalist who were criticizing and accusing the church of misconduct. Leaders at Apologia Church in Mesa said the couple and journalists defamed them and portrayed them so negatively that they were suffering damages. I think Paul says something about taking disputes between brothers to court, and certainly about airing them out in front of unbelievers to see. I don't know. I don't know how they would suffer damages or how they were defamed, but the Bible talks about us when we are, that, let me look that up. Jesus says in Matthew 5:11, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." Now, I say that not that it excludes lawsuits necessarily in cases of slander and defamation, nor am I saying that because of the fact that I think Jeff Durbin is innocent in this. I don't personally think that at this point. I'm saying that because from a Christian worldview, when people defame us or speak evil against us, Jesus doesn't say we're supposed to run out there and sue them. I don't see that in the Bible. In fact, like I said, I see in the Bible against us suing other believers. But this is kind of the behavior I'm noticing is typical of Apologia. They just come out and blame the victims and make themselves the victims. The pastors, Jeff Durbin, Luke Pearson, Zachary Morgan, who is now removed as a plaintiff, asked a Maricopa County Superior Court judge to force the couple and journalists to compensate them for the harm done and ban them from talking about the pastors. Wow. So they're asking for financial compensation. Wow, that doesn't even seem godly. I highly doubt Jeff Durbin's salary is affected by this at all. Jeff Durbin's own language, his tongue, and his conduct, he defames himself, frankly. That was the end of him for me, long time ago. This is just kind of the nail in the coffin. Ban them from talking about the pastors, the church, or the lawsuit, not just if the pastor's attorney proved defamation, but immediately while the court case played out. So they're suing them, and they're wanting financial compensation in addition to banning them from talking about them. That seems like what they were doing with the others. They were blackmailing them with recordings that they would use against them if they pursued matters against them. So, let's see. I'll just read the beginning of one of this main article. When Haley Osborne Maris and Cameron Maris shared intimate details about their marital problems with the church's pastors, they assumed it was in confidence. An unexpected text message months after they had talked to the pastors changed their belief. That belief. She opened a screenshot to see a private text exchange between the adult daughters of her church's pastors. The subject, a fight she had had with Cameron that involved a gun and police. Haley felt betrayed. She was also mortified and wounded. She had trusted and admired these men and couldn't believe they were sharing this information with their families. To her, that was the only explanation for how the daughters knew about it. She thought if the pastors had done this to her, they could be doing it to others. And yeah, it sounds like they are doing it to others, have done it to others. This sounds like just another case in a long line of previous similar incidents. I would like to know why Zach Morgan took himself off as a plaintiff. I like to think that it's because he had some kind of a movement of God in his heart and realized that what they'd done for years was ungodly. I'd like to think that. I really hope that there was a conviction there and a mourning over what they've done, realizing that it's unbiblical and that there are godly ways to handle this, in which suing and seeking financial compensation, I would say, are arguably not above reproach for a pastor, and certainly unbecoming of a pastor and a Christian in general. Anyway, October, pastors Jeff Durbin, Luke Pearson, and Zach Morgan sued the journalists Sarah Young and the Marises for defamation. In their lawsuit, the pastors deny they shared privileged, protected, or otherwise untruthful information about Haley and or Cameron with anyone outside of Apologia leadership. They contend Haley shared the information with other churchgoers within weeks of it happening, so she forfeited expectations for privacy. It kind of sounds like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Hey, we didn't do this, but she talked to other people about it, so she doesn't have any privacy anymore. Sounds like they're projecting onto her. I mean, regardless of whether she tells other people, she told them in confidence, and they are under obligation to keep shut about it, frankly. Obligation from God. The pastors denied they shared privileged, protected, or otherwise untruthful information about Haley and or Cameron with anyone outside of Apologia leadership. Okay, so whether it's truthful or not isn't the problem. Privileged or protected. It seems like there's some weasel words going on here. They say that she shared information with others, so she shouldn't expect privacy. She forfeited that. So it sounds like what they're saying, they're trying to weasel out of it with technicality. Well, she told other people, so it wasn't privileged or protected. That's kind of what I'm getting from this. We're lying without actually lying about it, even though they are actually lying about it. It doesn't matter if she told other people. It's not their business to tell others. And it kind of sounds like they did. Let's go down here. Okay, here's the background. Haley first started attending Apologia Church in 2022 after she found videos of Durbin preaching online. Haley started attending services in person when she realized the Mesa location wasn't too far away, she said. When she and Cameron got engaged, Pearson married them. Shortly into the marriage, Haley said she was experiencing triggers when her husband touched her. She had previously experienced domestic abuse, she said, and believed she was suffering from PTSD. She went to the Apologia pastors for help, but over the course of months, the marital conflicts only escalated, she told the Arizona Republic. A turning point came when, during an argument, Haley retrieved a gun and Cameron called police. Cameron told the pastors about it. They reached out to Haley over text message for her side of the story. She told them she preferred in-person conversation given the sensitivity, according to text messages released by Haley. It sounds like Apologia likes a paper trail. The elders like a paper trail. They either want texts from you or they want to record the conversation. Either way, they want to have leverage over you, which is abusive and ungodly. If I tell pastor something in confidence, I shouldn't have to be worried about him using that against me in some sort of a blackmail sort of way. Now, if he brings it up, if I go to him for counseling or something he notices about my behavior, that's one thing. I've had a personal experience where I shared something with a guy who, he's a Pentecostal sort, a heretical Pentecostal sort, and I shared something of a private, personal nature with him years ago, just as an act of goodwill, like, hey, I embrace you as a brother, let me tell you about this. And he brought it up at a later point to try to shame me when I had called him out for his heresy. That's what I'm getting from the Apologia elders. She told them she preferred in-person conversation given the sensitivity, according to text messages released by Haley. The messages show they pressed her anyway to send detailed texts or audio messages of what happened. Yeah, noticing a pattern here. The pastors emailed a couple days later to inform them that they wouldn't be welcomed at Apologia for at least 12 months. Now, what kind of a church does that to their members? Your members, a couple that are members, are having trouble, so you tell them you're banned for a year from coming to church? You're banned from fellowship for a year, even though you're not under formal church discipline. You're going through a rough time in your marriage, but you're seeking help. Banned for at least 12 months, maybe more. They believed Haley needed a psychological evaluation and said they needed to protect the other church attendees. The pastors blamed both spouses, but emphasized what they believed was Haley's lack of accountability. My goodness. This is abusive. This isn't a church. Didn't seem like they even tried to help this poor girl. Their help was, hey, you're banned. Oh, and you need a psychological evaluation. You're dangerous to the church attendees. That's awful. It makes me wonder if they really mean it when they go to abortion clinics and talk about how those children are made in the image of God and their lives have value because they're treating this woman like hers doesn't. That's awful. I mean, leave a comment if that makes me woke to think that Apologia was abusive. Well, not just in this instance, but in this one specifically. How to ban for at least 12 months. This girl needs a psychological evaluation, and we need to protect our other attendees. You're both at fault. You're both the problem, but she's more the problem. Wow, that's awful. Yeah. So much for pastoral care, living above reproach, helping each other in your weaknesses, being patient, kind, gentle, self-controlled, self-sacrificial. That's just evil. Haley told the Republic that she felt heartbroken and unfairly targeted, but didn't entirely blame the pastors and didn't find their responses unreasonable. I find it a little unreasonable. She still deeply admired them at that point, I don't know why, and planned to work on herself and try to return to their good graces. Now see, that's the difference between God and man. We don't have to work our way back into God's good graces. We need to repent, confess our sin, and He is just and merciful and will forgive us. No conditions. It's cast into the sea of forgetfulness. But with these men, who are supposedly godly men, who are in charge of a church, in theory they're under shepherds, They, like all Christians, are to show the same grace and mercy and understanding and kindness and concern for others that we get from Christ, from God, albeit not perfectly. They're sinful men, and so they're going to fail, but return to their good graces. That sounds pretty cult-like. It sounds like they're running a cult of personality down there, which arguably they are, but try to return to their good graces. Wow. If that doesn't show the view that she had of these guys, of the vibes they give off, that you have to earn your place back in their good graces, that's terrible. They didn't help her. When trouble came, they abandoned her and her husband and said, "So long. You're not welcome here for at least 12 months. And apparently she thought she needed to work her way back into their good graces. That's abusive. Then she received the text message months later showing Durbin's daughter gossiping about the fight involving the gun. The daughter described the conflict as tea. I don't know what that stands for. Spelled T-E-A, like drinking tea. I don't care. I don't know. Months later, in interviews with the Republic, Haley was still visibly upset when reflecting on the screenshot. It just caused a lot of damage, Haley said, her voice cracking. She paused and her eyes grew glossy. I was treated harsher than he was, and I really looked up to Jeff, Luke, and Zach. The Marises told the Republic their relationship suffered immensely during and after counseling. They remain married but have taken breaks and are still working through challenges, some of which existed before counseling and some they believe came as a result. Haley texted Durbin for an explanation, writing in part, "I can't go another day carrying the weight of how deeply these hurt me." He responded, requesting a call, but Haley said she didn't trust him anymore. "I believed you were a kind man, but I see that it was all to protect your reputation. You know how I know that now? Because you won't say I'm sorry. Can you forgive me?" Noticing another pattern here. For a pastor who talks about forgiveness, repentance, he's sure willing to receive it from others and then beat them over the head with it, but he doesn't want to give it. And that's when, after all this was going on, she turned to TikTok to make videos about this, In Haley's videos recounting the story, she said Durbin and the other pastors' failure to take accountability contradicted their biblical teachings. Yes, I agree with that, absolutely. It is absolutely unethical to invite your members to come to you for counseling in order to care for your souls and then turn and tell that personal information to the members of your family and who knows who else. Yeah, I agree with that. It's also inappropriate and unethical to invite your members to come to you for counseling in order to care for your souls, to just turn around and dump them and say, "Yeah, we don't want you around anymore." Not much of a counsel there, but again, let's see, lost my place. Okay, there it is. She also said she wasn't alone in her experience and that she had seen a plethora of evidence, such as voice recordings, screenshots, and testimonies that showed more pastoral misconduct. Yeah, we read a few of those. Okay, this is talking about Sarah Young now. She got in contact after seeing this gal's TikTok videos, and it says Young published emails showing that She repeatedly sought comment and information from the pastors. Young laid out in detail the claims she would include in her article and asked whether she had any facts wrong. Durbin told Young her information was wrong and warned her they would sue for defamation if she proceeded. I'm noticing a pattern here. I probably said that a lot. They seem very eager to sue. He told her they had no obligation to respond to her, that she was part of a non-Christian cult and had an unhealthy obsession with us. I don't know about Sarah Young personally. That very well might be true. She might be part of a non-Christian cult, but whether that is true or not, it doesn't change the fact that there are multiple different accounts of the same sort of issue with Durbin and the elders of the Apologia Church, but specifically Durbin. I would just ask you guys to look past whoever Sarah Young is, whatever cult she's tied to, and whatever bone she has to pick with Apologia. I'd ask you to look past that and just look at the facts as what I have laid out. Durbin's communications, Durbin's conduct, and what he has done to others. There is absolutely a pattern of behavior that is ungodly. And though they are suing her for defamation, I would propose they are the ones that are guilty of defaming her. And I would say what they did to her is evil. It's just evil, ungodly, antichrist. Apparently she had gone against Jeff Durbin for something. I don't know. Apparently there was something else that happened, but I'm not touching on that right now. Okay, apparently there were some abusive parents there, and Apologia, and well, that doesn't surprise me. I would say this, regardless of what Sarah Young is what she's saying true? Have there been other witnesses to this sort of behavior? And there have been. There absolutely has been. It doesn't matter if an atheist journalist was bringing this up. Now granted, like Julie Roy's, this gal may have an agenda, but let's look at the facts as they are laid out from other accounts. The Pulpit and Pen was by Seth Dunn and J.D. Hall, and I don't like J.D. Hall. I think he is just a hateful man too. But his reporting was accurate. I will say that. It's important to me that I don't publish false information. That's why I reached out to the church. She replied to Durbin again, I am reaching out to you in an effort to make my report balanced and to hear your side of what happened. I don't want to misrepresent anyone, or what happened, Young wrote. But if Haley's allegations are true, however, you are seriously abusing God's flock. I agree with that. It's too bad it takes a cultist to tell another cultist that. Durbin replied, we invite you to make the mistake, Sarah. For the record, it's your choice, and you have been warned. You have my personal promise in this case. There will be dramatic and embarrassing consequences. Now, that doesn't sound like a godly man to me. That doesn't sound like pastoral material. Yeah, this goes on, but this video is pretty long. We're almost at an hour, so I'll just finish with some thoughts. I will link the articles down below. Read them, determine for yourselves. I don't know what's going on here. Don't know. I'm in no way connected to this situation, but seeing it in the news reminded me of other instances of Durbin doing similar abusive, vindictive things, like with Tim Hurd. I knew about that, and then that caused me to dig in deeper, and I found all those other situations with the other people. I find it interesting that James White is not one of the men. He is a pastor at Apologia Church still, as far as I know. I do still watch James White on occasion. I like James White. I don't like who he hangs around. I don't think he's very discerning in that sense, but I think he's a godly man. But I find it interesting how he is not among those plaintiffs, and now Zach Morgan is not. And I really hope there is conviction there on Zach Morgan's part, and I hope there's conviction on James White's part. Because I will say this: Apologia Church is kind of run like a cult of personality. I mean, I really liked Apologia. They were a powerhouse. They got me excited to share the faith, wanting to share the faith. And now I just see it. I see them and I just feel disappointment. And just, yeah, it's just disappointing to see where they are. So, I don't know. That article I read with those different accounts, let me check real quick. I'll be right back. Yeah, that article, compilation article from Pulpit and Pen was from January 7th. I think it was January 7th of 2020. So that's 6 years ago. That was 5 years before this incident happened. This is not anything new, and the Bible says on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established. And I don't know. I am very disappointed to see where men I once thought were godly have gone. I mean, I liked Steve Lawson. Now he's off the grid after a sexually immoral affair with a woman who was like a third of his age. I never followed Josh Booth, but you know, his situation really wasn't all that dissimilar to Durbin, how he treated people. You know, he would come out and tell people what they did wrong and what the Bible says to do, and yet he was doing the exact same thing in secret, kind of like Durbin here. And, you know, Alistair Begg to a different degree with the gay wedding thing. It seems like more and more are just dropping. And I'm not saying some of these men aren't saved. I don't mean to say that, but I mean, before Vodi Balcom died, I was disappointed to see who he was partnering with. Tom Askell's not a very kind man. I'm very disappointed to see where Reformed circles are going. Years ago, it was fun. It felt like there was a love for doctrine, a love for evangelism, a love for the unborn. And now it just seems like there's fracturing. I mean, you got one side that's going Nazi, and I don't say Nazi lightly. Like, I know that term has lost all meaning, but literally where people like Joel Webb and Evangelical Dark Web, Eric Kahn and others are, that's where I was before I got saved. And now I just see what they're doing is repugnant and evil, and it's just baffling to me how they could be there when that is what I was sanctified out of. I don't know. I'm starting to realize more and more. I'm starting to rethink who has been labeled woke. Like, I think people have been way too hard on Al Mohler. Honestly. I mean, at this point, it's almost as if the conservatives have become woke, and there is a woke right. It's a mess. It's a real mess. I guess we need to go back to, one, we need to get rid of this ridiculous celebrity pastor culture, and it seems to be dying off, which is good. It needs to. But I think we need to go back to just learning from men who are dead. We know who they are, who they were, what they taught. Like J.I. Packer had some bad stuff, but he had a lot of really good stuff. John MacArthur had a lot of great stuff. He was kind of the last of the biblical conservatives, I think, because I think a lot of the men we see now, Tom Buck, Tom Askell, I don't think these men are the successors to John MacArthur that we need. It's sad to see, sad to say, but I think Christian conservatism, in its true sense, its true form, is dead. It's dying. So that's another tangent, but it's all kind of meshed together. All that to say, it's disappointing to see where Durbin is, because he was another giant that I really admired. Even after 2020, I still respected him. I still wanted to like him, but now I don't have respect for the man. I don't know that this is true. It's possible it's not. But, I mean, Durbin is quoted, and his quotes are not a man of peace, not a patient man, not a man who cares about the truth, who cares about reconciliation, but a man who cares about winning, and who cares about not having his image stained. And I don't know. I'm disappointed to see that, and if I don't hear out of Jeff Durbin ever again, that's fine. Prefer not to. But sad video to make. But most of the videos I make are on topics that are sad. So, alright.